It's homecoming at ACU, and the word of the day is football. I'm Hannah Knoll.
And I'm Grant Boone. We'll preview today's matchup between ACU and Incarnate Word and look back at the Wildcats' most memorable homecoming game of all time on the Ken Collums Show right now. Welcome to Week 8 of the Ken Collums Show, presented by Lawrence Hall. I'm Grant Boone, alongside ACU junior journalism major Hannah Knoll and the head football coach at ACU, Ken Collums. Happy homecoming, everybody. It's a huge weekend, as always. So many alumni, parents, friends, and fans coming in to celebrate reunion dinners later tonight all over the city. Hall of Fame induction ceremony last night. Coach, I know you're focused on beating Incarnate Word in just a couple of hours. How do you, as the head coach, balance game preparation with all of the festivities surrounding homecoming? It can be distracting for a head coach, can't it?
Yes, and as a head coach and his staff and a football team, our job is to produce on Saturday afternoon. And it sounds a little bit selfish, but you have to close and shut a lot of things out so they aren't distractions. I mean, people coming in that you love and that you have great experiences with, they're important, but you kind of have to shut them out and coach the game.
Coach, the homecoming game always has the biggest crowd of the season, but how much does that really play into how you do on the field?
Well, big crowds are crucial. So I don't know that it makes you make an extra play, but it is encouraging to your guys, and it's a fun atmosphere. That's what college football is all about.
Well, it should be a big festive day today for homecoming. We'll preview ACU and Incarnate Word a little bit later on in the show, but when we come back, highlights and analysis from last week's game against the #1 team in the nation. Stay with us on the Ken Collums Show, presented by Lawrence Hall. Each week on the Ken Collums Show, we celebrate ACU's 58th and final season at Shotwell Stadium. Today's final shot, homecoming 1976, when Wilbert Montgomery set the new collegiate touchdown record and Ova Johansson booted a 69-yard field goal, which remains the longest in college football history. We'll visit with the great Wally Bullington about that game a little bit later on in the show. Well, last week, ACU traveled to Huntsville, Texas to tangle with the new #1 team in FCS, Sam Houston State. And with a look at the highlights, here's Jonathan Rates.
ACU entered the Saturday matchup with the #2 team in the nation, looking to end a 9-game road losing streak. But Sam Houston State had other plans on its homecoming as it racked up 590 yards of total offense on its way to a 48-21 victory. With sophomore quarterback Dallas Seeley returning from a concussion, the offense was able to put up 391 yards of offense itself, but struggled putting points on the board in the first half. Between the two teams, there were 3 interceptions in the first quarter alone. The Bearcats struck first when Alonzo McMillan picked off Seeley and returned it 17 yards to the ACU 1-yard line. After a penalty on the return moved Sam Houston back to the 11, the ACU defense responded with an interception of its own as freshman Adonis Davis stepped in front of a Jeremiah Briscoe pass in the end zone to save a touchdown. The final interception of the first quarter was recorded by junior Sam Denmark, who stopped another Bearcats drive in ACU territory. Despite the 3 interceptions, it wasn't until late in the first quarter when Sam Houston finally found the end zone on an unconventional play that initially looked as if it might be Davis' second pick of the day. Instead, it went 69 yards for a touchdown and gave the Bearcats a 7-0 lead. The Wildcats were unable to put anything together in response, and on the Bearcats' ensuing drive, Briscoe found Nathan Stewart for the second time on the day from 16 yards out. However, SHSU's PAT attempt sailed wide and the score remained 13-0. The Bearcats would score on its next drive as well when they put together an 11-play, 76-yard drive capped off by another Briscoe touchdown pass to take a 20-0 lead. Sam Houston scored again with under a minute to go on a 15-yard pass from Briscoe to Tyler Scott to push the lead to 27-0 at the half. Out of the locker room, ACU showed signs of life as Seeley found freshman Josh Fink from 8 yards out on the 8th play of the drive to cut the lead to 27-7 with 12:04 remaining in the third quarter. But the Bearcats responded with back-to-back touchdowns from Remus Bulmer, including a 12-yard touchdown reception to extend the lead at 41-7. Briscoe also added another touchdown pass when he found Deion Hutchinson from 4 yards out to take a 41-point lead at 48-7 with 3:29 left in the third. ACU got back-to-back touchdowns of its own as it scored the only points of the fourth quarter, beginning with a 14-yard pass from Seeley to DJ Fuller to cut the lead to 48-14. Later in the fourth, Seeley found Fuller again, but this time from 59 yards out to put the score at its eventual final of 48-21. Fuller finished with 8 catches for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Wildcats fell to 0-7 on the season. Wildcats return to Shotwell next weekend for their homecoming against Incarnate Word.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. It was a final score, Coach, that I don't think really told the complete story of how the game went. Against the #1 offense in the nation, they drive down with the first possession of the game. They get to a 4th and goal at the 1-yard line. They go for it, and it looked like your D-line got some push.
Sure. I mean, that was a goal line stand against a great offense.
Great.
And you know, so we were proud of that. That gave us a little shot in the tail, and we were able to move the ball a little bit in the first quarter, but other than that, not much production. But our defense played really well. They gave up yards, but they kept them out of the end zone.
Well, after an exchange of punts, they then get an interception from Dallas Ely, just the third one he's thrown all year. They take it back into the end zone, but it got called back because of a penalty. And then you get a pickoff from freshman Adonis Davis. He stepped into a starting role. Overall, how would you say he's done these last 3
Well,
weeks?
he's done well. He's a fierce competitor. He's not a big guy. He's very strong, very explosive. You know, really good technique for a young guy. So he tends to be where he's supposed to be, and he's got some instincts, and that's the reason he picked that ball off in the end zone.
Well, he nearly got another interception. In fact, Jeremiah Briscoe, the quarterback for Sam, had thrown 2 picks all year against 20 touchdowns. You picked him off twice in the first quarter. Adonis Davis had that one in the end zone. Then Sam Denmark with some fancy footwork along the sidelines. Sam, he makes his living, you know, here, earns his scholarship putting 2 hands around ball carriers, but he's showing some ball skills and some footwork.
Yeah, he's just instinctive.
Yeah.
He's a football player, and you know, he's not the fastest, most explosive guy, but he's always around the ball. He's always making tackles, and when a ball is tipped, there's a good chance he's going to be around it. And we've had our share of dropped interceptions this year, which we did in that game. But he sure, you know, he fought on to catch that one and keep his feet in bounds.
You talk about the opportunity. I mentioned it earlier. Adonis Davis had the 1 pickoff, but then 30 seconds to go, first quarter, scoreless game against the #1 offense in the nation. They throw deep on 3rd and 14. It looked like Adonis made a great play on the ball. Instead, it pops off of his chest or shoulder pad or something, and Nathan Stewart in stride catches. It goes into the end zone for Sam Houston State. I mean, it looked like you did everything except one thing right, and that's finish off the catch.
Yeah, I had a great view of the whole play, and I couldn't believe their quarterback was going to throw it. And he threw it, and I'm like, we got this. This is easy. And it was easy until he didn't catch it. And not only not catching it, it somehow ended up being ejected into the air, and it was unfortunate. But, you know, it was a great play for them.
It was.
The guy was in the right spot.
He wasn't even the intended receiver, and that was so frustrating. Coach, you'll go a couple of years without seeing a tipped ball like that go for a touchdown, and they do it twice in 1/2 with a minute to go in the second quarter. 3rd and goal from the 15. It looked like LaMarcus Allen dropped back in coverage, got his big right paw on the ball, and what do you know? It lands in the hands of Tyler Scott, and he's got a touchdown.
Yeah, and he wasn't even the guy.
He was not the receiver there.
Yeah, so
what do you say?
You know, it's this college football. I mean, things happen, crazy things happen, and you know, sometimes it bounces your way, and sometimes it just doesn't.
Let's get all of this out of the way this year, and then next year we're eligible for the playoffs, and the ball will bounce our way. Hey, you start the 3rd quarter quickly with Dallas Ely marching you down the field, finishing the drive off with a touchdown pass to Josh Fink. He also extended that drive with a 14-yard run on a 3rd and 9. Didn't that really show the entire Dallas Ely package and how explosive he can be?
Sure. I mean, and that is crucial to moving the ball against a good defense. You're not going to be able to sit back there and throw it all day, and we didn't plan on doing that anyway. It was a lot of the short, quick type stuff that helped us get down the field. But you know, sooner or later, your quarterback's got to make a play with his feet, and that's what Dallas did.
Well, final score 48-21 certainly was not reflective of how competitive ASU, especially defensively, played. Well, as we go to break, we will show you some scores from around the Southland Conference last week, and then we'll come back and relive the great homecoming game of 1976. Stay with us here on the Ken Collums Show.
We're back with more of the Ken Collums Show. It's homecoming week at ACU, and while football will face the Cardinals at home, the volleyball team has the weekend off, and women's soccer travels to Huntsville to face the Bearcats. Here's Max Preston with a look at more ACU sports.
Thanks, Hannah. The volleyball team played 2 home matches last week on Thursday and Saturday against Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston, winning both with a 3-2 set score. Sophomores J.C. Smith and Kendall Bossy were named Southland Conference honorable mentions as Smith posted 34 kills while Bossy put up a very impressive 98 assists over the 2 matches. The women were scheduled to next play Incarnate Word Tuesday. The soccer team had a 2-game weekend homestand playing Lamar Friday, winning 2-1, and McNeese on Sunday, also winning 2-1. Against Lamar, senior Leslie Snyder and freshman Shay Johnson scored goals in the second half, giving them both their 3rd goals on the season. Against McNeese, senior Kelsey Roberts and junior Chloe Pfeiffer scored goals in the second half as well. This was Roberts' 4th goal of the season, giving her the outright lead of goals on the team, while Pfeiffer's was her 3rd of the season. This concluded the home games for the women in the 2016 season. They now have 3 away games remaining and are scheduled to next play SFA Friday. Lucille Potier represented the women's tennis team at the Oracle ITA Masters this weekend. She was able to pick up 2 wins and make it to the semifinals of the singles constellation draw before losing. She also won a match in the mixed doubles main draw before losing in the round of 16. The women will next be going to Waco for the ITA Regionals Thursday, while the men will go to Fort Worth for their ITA Regionals on Friday. Well, that wraps up this week's Sportscast. For JMC Network Sports, I'm Max Preston.
Thanks, Max. Today against Incarnate Word, ACU plays its 89th homecoming game, a tradition that goes all the way back to the 2nd year of the program in 1920. There have been great players and big moments on this weekend through the years, but there has never been a homecoming game like the one in 1976. It began with the expectation of one college football record being set and ended with another one that no one could have ever anticipated. Grant looks back at a historical homecoming with the Wildcats head coach at the time, Wally Bullington.
Well, it's homecoming at ACU, and Coach, homecoming makes us think about that 1976 game when you were the head coach. Wilbert Montgomery had 66 touchdowns. He was tied with Walter Payton. How much hoopla was there going into that game against East Texas State that day in 1976?
Well, most of the people knew he had a good chance of setting a national record, which he did. And those who kept up with our team knew that that was a possibility.
Well, his little brother Clee scored first in the game, and it was 7-0, and you're ahead of East Texas State. And while a lot of people were expecting Wilbert to set a collegiate record, I don't know how many people were expecting Ova Johansson to set a collegiate and what is still a world record field goal. But you told me that Ova himself had designs on maybe making history. What did he tell you earlier in the week?
He came into my office on Tuesday, said, "Coach, if you let me try, I'll set a record field goal for distance. Wilbert will set a touchdown record, and I'll set a field goal record." Well, in the pregame warm-up, he kicked a 70-yarder.
Wow.
And the East Texas people who were doing calisthenics there couldn't believe it. So they also couldn't believe it just before the half when we lined up for a field goal, which was a 69-yarder.
Coach, it's amazing. In the early 70s, they moved the field goal from the goal line back to the back of the end zone. So by 1976, you've got the goalpost back there, which means you were on about, what, your own 48 or so when you sent him in?
Yeah, our own 39.
Goodness gracious.
And so it's just unbelievable. And I had a newspaper in Philadelphia call me, the Philadelphia Inquirer, said, "Coach, why would you try a 69-yard field goal?" I said, "Well, he made 2 70-yarders in the pregame warm-up."
It's amazing. How did Ove even wind up? He had never played American football. How did he wind up at ACU?
Well, he really followed his girlfriend here. April, who is now his wife, came to school here, and Ova came, And Greg Sturman, I tied in, saw him kicking field goals on the intramural field and told me, he said, Coach, I've seen a guy kick a football further than I've ever seen anybody.
Wow.
And I said, yeah, you hear that all the time.
Sure.
I said, tell him to come by practice. He did, and he could.
So we need to give Greg Sturman some credit.
That's right. Greg was the best recruiter.
He deserved to be in the Hall of Fame for that alone, not just what else he did on the football field. Coach Wilbert Montgomery did get the record that day for collegiate touchdowns, got his 67th. He wound up with 76 in his career. You were his head coach for all 4 years at ACU. Has there ever been anybody better?
Never has. He was probably at that time among the best running backs in the whole state of Texas on any classification. Chuck Moser, who was the athletic director at public schools then, came and watched him play, and he said, Wally, I've never seen a better running back than Wilbert Montgomery. So he could have played anywhere.
Of course, he went on to play for the Philadelphia Eagles. There was some irony, wasn't there, that he broke Walter Payton's record, Walter who went to Jackson State. If not for our old friend Don Smitty Smith, Wilbert Montgomery might have gone to Jackson State, mightn't he?
That's a possibility. Smitty went over to visit with Wilbert and his family, and Wilbert came home. He had been over to visit the school, and of course he came on back out here, and the rest is history.
The rest is history, and a lot of history was made that day, homecoming 1976. Coach, we are right here by the practice facility that the football team uses. It has your name on it, and behind us we can see Wildcat Stadium. You began playing football at ACU at Fair Park. You coached at Shotwell Stadium, and now you're going to see Wildcat Stadium. Can you believe, first of all, that it's been 40 years since that homecoming day, and can you believe what's going up behind you here?
It's amazing what's going up behind us. And I've said a long time, I hope I live long enough to see an on-campus stadium. I think we're going to make it, Grant. So that's what we're looking forward to. Next year, we'll be in that new on-campus stadium.
The ACU Athletics Department is honoring both Montgomery and Johansson at the Legends Luncheon today at noon on campus. When we come back, we'll preview today's homecoming game against the Incarnate Word Cardinals. Stay with us right here on the Ken Collums Show.
Welcome back to the Ken Collums Show, presented by Lawrence Hall. Take a look at this week's schedule in the Southland Conference. The two teams tied for first are in action. Sam Houston State on the road to take on the much-improved Nichols Colonels down in Thibodaux, Louisiana. And Central Arkansas hosts Lamar, whose star running back Cade Harrington suffered a broken foot in last week's game against Northwestern State. Well, today at 2:30, it's ACU's final homecoming game at Shotwell Stadium. The opponent is the University of the Incarnate Word from down in San Antone. The Wildcats are a perfect 3-0 against the Cardinals at home, having outscored them 122-22 in those 3 games. But, Coach, this is an offense led by quarterback Trent Britton. We've gotten to know him over the last few years, and they went up against Sam Houston State in their last game. They had an off week last week. They scored 48 points and rolled up about 500 yards on a pretty good Sam Houston State team. What is it about Trent Britton that allows him to move that offense?
Well, this year, in particular in that game, he threw the deep ball really well. They've created with play action some time to run some double moves down the field, and you know, Sam Houston's defensive backs are pretty aggressive. So they when they had shots down the field, they hit them. And Trent did a really good job. He's a fine quarterback. You just seen him grow up throughout the years, and he does a fine job.
He can move a little bit.
He sure can.
Yeah.
The Cardinals defense has a high number of points allowed against its opponents. Does this change your offensive strategy at all?
No, our deal is we've got to do what we do better and more consistently. You know, at times we kind of spit and sputter and go 3 and out, but then times we look really good. I've been saying that for weeks now, but I think we're right on the brink of breaking out and playing for 4 quarters. And you know, they do a good job on defense. You know, there's a lot of teams in this league have really good offenses, and to see numbers and points given up, that's just kind of the way it is sometimes in college football today.
That's a good point. Coach, last year your team suffered through a plague of injuries that very few teams ever have to deal with. A quarter of your roster at one point was on the bench injured. And I think about the Incarnate Word last year really is the epitome of that struggle. You didn't even have a fullback, any of your regular fullbacks for that game. This year, the injuries haven't been as plentiful as they were, but it seems like they've happened to the worst people at the most inopportune time. How'd you come out of the Sam Houston State game in terms of injuries?
Well, we're fairly healthy to have played 7 games. We're fairly healthy. Every team is beat up across the country at this point, and it just comes down to the fact that you better have some backups, you better have some depth that have some experience, or you're going to get exposed. So we're fine. We're not totally healthy. I don't know that anybody is, but some of the key pieces we've been missing throughout the year. Dallas missed a couple of games, and DJ Fuller, and DeAndre. I think he's finally healthy. So we look forward to a productive afternoon with our guys.
Coach, we talked about at the beginning of the season how intense this schedule would be with 11 straight games. Well, the Cardinals are coming off their bye week, and we're just now finishing up week 8. So how do you think the guys are doing right now, just overall?
Well, I would love to have a break right now, but you know what? I don't get to make that call. The conference does. So to have a week off is pretty crucial there in the middle of the season or 2/3 of the way through the season. So it's good for them, and challenging for us, but it doesn't change the 3-hour game on Saturday afternoon, so we better play well regardless.
It's been a season of challenges, so we'll see if the Wildcats can rise up today and knock off those Cardinals. Should be a huge day out at Shotwell Stadium for homecoming. In fact, the Wildcat Country tailgate festivities get going here in just a couple of minutes. All kinds of food and fun for you out there. Kickoff against Incarnate Word set for 2:30. Pre-game show on the ASU Sports Network begins at 2. For Coach and for Hannah, I'm Grant Boone. Thanks for watching the Ken Collums Show presented by Lawrence Hall. Enjoy the game and homecoming weekend, and we'll see you right here next week.